Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Pitt Season 1 Episode 2. It is called 8am. So spoilers for the episode, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for picking the show. So my worry starting this episode was that, oh god, how many of the cases from the first episode, like the medical cases, do I have to remember? Because that may be tough episode to episode. Luckily, not too many of them. Obviously, the kid who ran away, who might be planning something dangerous, stuck out. There is the one older guy who seemed to be okay, and I say seemed because he's clearly dead at the end of the episode of this one. But the one that the Whitaker was sort of helping with and took care. But other than those, you've got the kid who accidentally took some cannabis, and he's still around. But otherwise, it's a lot of new stuff for the most part, and some of it's dealt with this episode, some of it's left seemingly for following episodes, and particularly a gunshot victim who's dropped off from a van. Clearly something that happens every once in a while when someone who's in criminal activity is dropped off with an injury at the hospital, but they don't want to, get anyone else involved to answer questions or anything like that. So, I mean, I think the thing for me here is that the back 10 minutes of this episode had a lot of strong moments, a lot of more bittersweet kind of the harsh reality of working in this situation of not only sad news. So we've got a combination of three things happening at the end of the episode. You've got Robbie telling the parents of an 18-year-old that their son is brain dead because he took, oh god, I can't remember what he took, but he took something that wasn't necessarily something illegal, right? It's part of regular medication. So you might not have known he took too much of something or whatever, or maybe he did. Maybe he was using drugs to deal with how much pressure he was under. It sounded like he was a bit of a workaholic, doing a part-time job, full-time college, so on. So it sounds like he was a bit of an achiever. But regardless, Robbie needs to tell the parents that he's brain dead, and it's kind of like a pivotal moment where, for the first time in the episode, the first time in the show, really, because it's only been 2 episodes, so it doesn't mean as much, but we don't actually go in with him. We just see him shut the door, and we see through the window the reaction of the parents. And when we do hear something, it's because the mother's screaming so loud that the muffled sound of it's coming through the door. And the direction makes a point of capturing reactions of various other people around the room or the floor. Some of them being the staff, but some of them being other patients who are concerned about certain things and they're going through their own stuff. So you've got that going on, which is obviously very sad. You've also got this old man who is, I think he came in maybe the last episode, but most of his story's been this episode, and his 2 children who are both adults, because he's old. They're debating throughout the episode whether or not they should put him on, breathing life support should it come to that. And apparently the old man, before now, had put in writing that he wouldn't want that. But they've got the power to overrule that if they wish, because they both have power of attorney. And that's something that Robbie's been trying to talk them out of all episode. But they're going to do it anyway, even though he's made it very clear that this is probably just going to make him miserable and torture him for whatever life he's got left, because it's not very pleasant. And because he's very ill in other ways, he's I don't know if they specifically said, they probably did when they brought him in, what conditions he has, but he doesn't know where he is. He's very confused, whether that's Alzheimer's or something else. And so that's going on, and he Robbie goes from telling these parents about their son and the tragedy of that, and then walks straight next door to where this pair of siblings and the old man are, and quietly starts performing the procedure to put him on the support. And it's all just played out in silence. He's having a very bad few minutes. This family's not listening to him, and he's just had to tell this horrible news to someone else. And then the episode ends on Whitaker trying to save the life of the man who had the Gladstone problem. And he kind of came out of nowhere as a shock death. He seemed fine earlier on. He was joking around with Whitaker, asking for certain things, and Whitaker saying, you can't have that. We're a hospital. We're not giving you bourbon, blah, 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 blah. And it's all very nice and whatever. And when he comes back to check on him towards the end of the episode, he's just dead. He's unresponsive, and they try and do everything they can to bring him back. They zap him, whatever. And Whitaker's the one doing the compressions, and he keeps going, even though everyone else is clearly ready to call this. And in some ways, this was the most, not the most tragic per se, because an 18-year-old being brain dead and like the rest of his life effectively being gone is the most tragic, right? The old man, sad, but he's old at least, so it's not quite the same. I think in some ways though, this hit harder, and maybe they knew it would hit harder because the episode ends on it. And I think the reason why it hits harder is because the tragedy here isn't so much the patient. The patient is obviously he was a likable guy, and it's a shame that he's gone. He deserved to have more years left and all the rest of it. But fundamentally, the patients coming in and out of here, and this is something that comes up in a lot of TV shows, especially old school network shows, is that the show's not about the patients. Yes, they provide the plot in the sense that they provide the medical cases for what the doctors and the nurses are going to solve and figure out. But the show is about our main characters, and our main characters are the doctors and the med students and so on and so forth. And I think this hits harder because while obviously the other two things are hitting Robbie hard as he's, dealing with both of those situations, and it hits quite, and there's that nice little moment beforehand where I'm still learning all the names, so I'm got my cheat sheet up. Collins comes over and talks to him and says, "Hey, do you want me to go in with you?" And they've been kind of had this awkward kind of chemistry thing going on at Oz. There's a bit earlier in the episode where some other guy was flirting with her, and when he tried to talk to her about it, she just shot him down. And it was amusing the way she shot him down, but it was kind of like, hey, like there's some barriers between them right now, but in this moment there's an understanding, and like, hey, do you want me to come and be like a support for this, a wingman, if you will? And he declines, but it's just a nice little, again, it's like it's almost the most important detail of this part with Robbie, is this idea that she was willing to come and help him with it, even though he turned it down, because that's the part that's really about our main characters. And I think Whitaker trying to save this old man and failing to do so, and I say old, he's not even that old, he's like in his 50s or something, but him trying to save this old man is not about the saving the old man, it's about Whitaker losing his first patient. Right, that's what this is. I mean, unless they tell me something else in next episode, my assumption here would be that this is the first person that he has ever treated that has died, somewhat on his watch, and presumably he will feel guilty that he didn't check on him sooner, because that's one of the things they say when they wheel him into the other room and they start doing whatever they can to try and save him. They say, "Oh, he's been gone for a while. Like this didn't just happen," and we know because the show is more or less in real time, give or take, we know when he says it was about half an hour ago that he checked on him, we know that's true, because that was about half an hour ago for us too. We saw it. And he's been busy dealing with other things and, looking after other people. So I think, if nothing else, we can sympathize with him and know that he's not really to blame for this. He's juggling all the things he's supposed to be juggling the way he's supposed to be. Maybe it's a sign that there should be more doctors even, or the system's imperfect or whatever, but there's only so much a human being can do to try and take care of all this. And I think that was what stuck out to me the most about this, is that the episode doesn't end with him finally accepting it. It actually cuts before that, where he's still doing the compressions and everyone else is kind of... Like, there's a moment before Robbie leaves to do the other stuff where he's basically already decided this is it. Like, this guy's gone. Right, everyone in the room kind of knows this and has agreed to it. Not verbally, they're not said to anything to each other, but they all know he's gone. But Robbie makes this choice, and it clearly is a choice about Whitaker. This is not about like giving the patient another chance, because he genuinely doesn't think he's coming back. He makes the choice to let Whitaker play it out, because I think on some level it's probably important for Whitaker to go through this process where he has to decide himself to call it. And that's kind of like the final moment before it ends with him still compressing and refusing to give up. It's the other guy, Langdon, who says, "Hey, like, are you ready to call it?" And he's like, "No. Robbie said we could do 3 rounds of EpiPens, let's do 1 more." And he's like, "Okay." And Langdon is the kind of the dickheady one. Like, I mean, I'm not saying he's a complete asshole or anything, but he's definitely the one who's a bit more jaded and a bit more cynical. There's a few more examples of that in this episode. And I think that moment of him nodding and saying, okay. Like, on some level, he also like understands that Robbie's letting Whitaker play it out to learn the lesson, if you want to call it. And not in a cruel way. It's not like, oh, he has to learn the lesson of losing the patient. It's something that all doctors, presumably, especially in an emergency room scenario, have to go through, is losing people, because not all of them are going to make it. And he has to make that decision himself when this is over. When it's time to say, no, this man is gone and I have to pronounce death. And it's not something that they're making the choice to not step in and take that away from them and do it themselves, even though on some level you could argue maybe they should at a certain point. Maybe this is wasting too much time. Maybe it's wasting, maybe if the hospital was busier right now, like there was a line earlier on about how they always have one operating room at the ready, so that there's one ready to go. And the other Medstron King says, hey, but what if there's, multiple people needing them at the same time? It's like, well, things get a lot busier. So you get the sense that, well, as frantic as this seems to us, the audience, this is actually a chill, like, period in the day, or so far. Because I expect that by the end of the season, it's not going to be a chill day anymore. So yeah, maybe if it was busier, they would maybe step in and say, no, we have to call this. We don't have time to waste, the two... because he's not alone. He's got another doctor and a nurse there. Like, he's taking time from people who could be working on other patients to go through this process, but clearly we're not at the point where that's immediately required. So they're letting this play out as an important lesson for him, and I think that's a good little character bit. And this is definitely the chunk of the episode that I liked the most, because it felt like it was advancing how I understood these characters and understanding their story. Whereas the first half of the episode is perfectly fine, but I don't really have that much to say about the first half or so of the episode, because it was mostly just dealing with the patients and going through what's wrong with them, and there's some fun enough bits where they're doing bits of surgery here, a little bits of comedy here or there. There's a homeless guy that comes in who has rats under his shirt, so when they cut it open, the rats scatter around. Robbie cracks some jokes about that to the management lady that comes down. I guess the other big character thing that's revealed this episode out of nowhere is that Mackay, Fiona Dourif's character, she's wearing an ankle bracelet, like one of the, like house arrest style ankle bracelets, and it starts beeping and saying, "Hey, are you somewhere you're not supposed to be?" And she's like, "Oh, god damn it, no, I'm at work. This is an authorized location." So clearly it's messing up and not, maybe they've not like programmed it right for the hospital or something. But it's like, oh, that's interesting, and that happens in front of Victoria Javadi, right? Her character like sees this. And she's been kind of befriending Mackay. And also, I do know that when she talks to the other Medstron about her and says, hey, do you know anything about Dr. McKay? She pronounces it that way. And maybe that's how it's supposed to be pronounced technically, in the sense that an American would say it that way. But I also think that Americans might not know how to pronounce Mackay, because that's absolutely how it's pronounced in Scotland. And given that the name starts with a Mick, I am going to play the Scottish card here and say it how I want to. So deal with it. But anyway, she has the ankle bracelet. We know she's a single mother, and she talks about that a little bit with Javadi. Javadi's got a little moment as well where she clearly thinks Matteo, to pronounce it correctly, she clearly maybe thinks he's attractive, because he makes a little joke and she laughs in a really kind of silly, giggly way, and Mackay clearly is like, you can say his name, like, and is giving her the eye, like, because they just like finished having a conversation where Javadi was like, oh, I've had no time for like relationships. I'm like not only is she a third year med student, she's like a little ahead of her age. She's sort of advanced quicker than she's supposed to. So she's probably been working quite hard and is the type of person that's not had a ton of time for exploring the romantic side of her life or whatever. So she's a little bit maybe more naive than some of the others in some respects. And I think that does play out when she's talking to Santos. I mean, that's the same conversation I was referring to earlier. But Santos does feel like she's ready to crack some jokes. She's ready. And not that you have to be everything that Javadi is to be a more shy person or a more timid person, or someone who's not ready to like throw the jabs at each other like the others might be. But it definitely adds up, and the sense of the characters that they've built built between the two of them, and Santos kind of, bragging a little bit about, oh, I got to do this procedure today. I got to cut some, electrocution victim's wound open, and that was a whole thing. And there's a funny little bit here as well where I think this is the funniest part of the episode, actually, is the two ladies who work at the hospital who speak the other language are both sitting behind the sort of the reception desk kind of area, and it cuts to a shot as they're arguing is maybe a bit of a strong word, but when Santos and Javadi are kind of having these jabs back and forward about the nickname Crash that she doesn't like very much, it cuts to like a two shot from behind their shoulders, looking down at the two women looking up and just kind of staring, almost like a tennis match, watching back and forth as they're trading the jabs. And then they say in their other language, I bet by the end of the shift, one of them slaps the other. And I think that's very possible. I think because they've put that in, I'm expecting one of them to be slapped. Maybe the show will swerve me and someone else will slap one of them, and not, but it won't be one of those two. But one of them's getting slapped by the end of the season. I'm calling it. I'm calling it now based on what they've said here. You don't set that up and not pay it off. Yeah. So the other cases that are kind of continued throughout. I mean, I kind of said the ending of some of them. The kid who had the cannabis, his mother is very upset when they bring the social worker in, and they say this is just standard procedure because it's a controlled substance, they have to talk this out, and she immediately gets defensive and thinks that, oh, you're going to take my son away, and she causes such a ruckus that they call in security, and they say that if she doesn't calm down, she's maybe going to be booted out of the building and she won't have a choice, but they'd rather she stay and talk about it, but her temper gets very flared up. And the thing that ultimately calms her down a little bit is when they say that if they kick her out, then it's going to be the dad that does all the conversations with the social worker and whoever's coming to see them about the kid. And it's almost like she has that realization, oh no, I don't want him handling that. Because she's actually pretty pissed at him. She also says he has to go and find a hotel several points during our little rant. So that's going on. It's another example of a fire that needs to be put out that Robbie has to come in and help kind of calm down a little bit. Yeah, there's a whole thing with the siblings and their dad and deciding what to do with them. That's kind of running throughout the episode where every time you see them, it's getting a little bit worse, and Robbie keeps saying, hey, you may have to make this choice soon, and so on and so on. So that plays out. Like I said, the gunshot wound thing happens. With the guy getting dropped off in the van, and that's a little bit different. Definitely add some kind of like, I guess it's more traditional. I think when you watch a lot of movies and TV, gunshot wounds are the things you hear about the most. Whereas a lot of this other stuff, which is like, oh, you were drinking too many energy drinks while you were also on Adderall. Don't do that. That's what's causing these various problems. So no, I think the medical kind of like jargon and the solving of the various cases is done pretty well, but I also think that unless it's attached to like a main character's like story or growth or a pivotal moment for them, because I think like Santos has a couple of moments in here where she's like allowed to do something. One's cutting into the skin. Well, I think they're both that technically. The other one's to throw it for the breather. But like she's allowed to do a couple of things, and she gets a little cocky about it, and that's kind of just reiterating her character, and that's okay in episode 2. We're still kind of learning who these people are, and we're still getting used to the idea of who their characters. Just it's good to be reminded of certain things, and the episode knows to remind you of a couple of important things. It reminds you that it's the anniversary of this other doctor's death, right? That was a big point that was brought up in episode 1, but they make a point of having someone remind someone else to go easy on Robbie because it's that day. And that's very intentionally put in episode 2, just because, yeah, it's very easy to just not retain information when you're watching a TV show, and I'm guilty of it. And good writing accounts for that, and repetition, and not too much. It can start to sound like it's getting dumbed down. But when it's stuff that you have to remember from previous episodes, it's good to just have little re-ups, because just a little reminder can bring it all back. And that's kind of like what that type of moment does there. Which inherently reminds me that, you know, the last episode ended with this like flashback moment that this episode starts with, but doesn't last very long. Like very quickly, Robbie snapped back out of it and is back into reality, and we leave it for there. Another important point is that Robbie, when talking about the 18-year-old who's brain dead, I think it's before we know that he's definitely brain dead, or maybe it isn't actually, maybe a bit late in the episode, but he mentions that, oh, he's not much older than Jake. And I don't remember from episode 1 if we know who Jake is. I'm not sure. Given the way he says that, it sounds like it's either his son or maybe one of the other Doctor's sons or something. But either way, it felt like that was an important little detail. So I'll be listening for the name Jake again, because they had that little moment. If he was brought up in episode 1, by all means remind me in the comments. But yeah, so no, I mean, I think there's some good character growth here, especially in those last like 10 minutes or so of the episode, where it really felt like it was starting to move a bunch of stuff. Oh, the other plot that I've not mentioned yet that's important, and probably is more character than she got in the first episode, is Samira, who gets to be more sympathetic. They bring in this woman who's freaking out and they're trying to restrain her, and she basically talks them down and says, hey, don't restrain her. She's, you know, there's something serious going on here, and she needs so much medication. And it becomes kind of a point where Whittaker is a little worried that this is actually like a faker who just wants drugs, who just wants morphine and whatever. And she basically explains why that's not the case. You know, he'll get good at spotting them. But I think the main thing for me in this plot was just how she stayed calm. She talked to her like a human being, asked what was wrong. And even after the fact, she was very kind of pleasant to both her. And then the woman's wife showed up, and it turns out, yeah, she's on a lot of medication at home for, you know, whatever reason. And, you know, it sold a lot of who Samira is as a character. And I don't know if she got a ton in the first episode. So it was nice to kind of spread some of this stuff out a little bit. Whereas, you know, some of them got more than others. I mean, Robbie seems to always be getting the most because he's the lead. But it's nice to kind of spread that out a little bit. Oh, and just to correct myself, because I think earlier I said Javadi was a little bit like ahead of her age. I think that's actually King's character. I think I'm conflating those two characters a little bit. Because King's the one who needs to go out for the breath, and that was kind of after her talking about some of that stuff. So I think I'm conflating those two a little bit. So yeah, Javadi's got the pressure because her mum works upstairs. So forgive me, I'm still kind of like getting all these characters straight, because I mean, just looking at this page in IMDb, I would say the primary characters consist of like 5 doctors and 4 med students. Would be like, and that's a reasonable amount of characters, and then there's a lot of supporting cast kind of sprinkled in around them. So forgive me as I'm trying to keep them straight here. But yeah, King's the one who's a bit more altruistic, who has a lot of like noble ideas. But which is funny, because I think the smart thing they do with her is they have her paired for the most part with Langdon, who's like the super cynical, jaded one. So when she starts like saying things like, "Oh, every doctor should spend time at the VAs for this reason or that," he's like, "Oh, that's a nice thought." But he's the one that we keep hearing being cynical. So it's actually kind of nice to sort of contrast them a little bit. It's almost, it's very, I guess, like, you know, they made a smart choice here in the writing by putting the most optimistic, hopeful young person next to the most jaded one of the doctors. So I think that's a fun choice. Plus, there's a little bit with him where he mentions that he got a dog for his kid to play with, and as Evans says to him, that, wait, was that your idea? Did you just give your wife something else to take care of when you've got a young child? And he gets a little defensive about it, but maybe shows that he didn't think it through, and again maybe suggests about him being a little self-centered, maybe not, you know, not bad intentions per se, but didn't think through you know, the results. He says that, oh, you know, my son agreed to look after it, and she's like, a 4-year-old? Which is a fair choice, or a fair statement to make. The kid that ran away, who might be doing something bad, there is another scene where the mother talks to Robbie, and she's going to keep trying texting him to get him to come back. But she is worried and does point out that even though she thinks that he wouldn't do anything violent, most parents who have kids that do something like that probably feel that way, and she's aware of that. And so she's pretty level-headed for the situation that she thinks she's in, which is nice to see. So no, it's interesting. And I think it's also interesting, just to go back to the very first thing I started talking about, which was Robbie trying to convince the siblings to not put their father onto the life support, because he basically described how painful it would be and how it would, it'd be more humane just to give a nice, peaceful, quick, natural death, and it'd maybe be time. He does try to contest them a little bit, and even says that he might, fight them because he's already written down that he wants a certain thing to happen, and that he would rather go with that than what they decide. And then they threaten to go to the, a medical attorney or whatever. And I think it's interesting that he backs down, not because he doesn't think he's right or that he doesn't think that he will win. In fact, when Collins comes over and suggests that, that's a bad idea and says that they should fight it, and she would back him up and co-sign it, he says, yeah, we would probably win. And the other medical professionals would agree that the choice we were making made sense, and they would probably back us in what we're trying to do or what we think should happen. But it would eat up a lot of time, fighting that. It would eat up a lot of time doing that, and it would be much quicker to just do what they want, even though we think it's kind of cruel. So it's more about them not tying themselves up when other people are going to need help, and there's more to do. So again, that's a kind of a character beat as well. And it's interesting because it's kind of him thinking about everyone and not just the one person that he was trying to help. Whereas Collins is a bit more no, we should fight this. I want to fight this with you. And they kind of, whatever. And he also talks about how he's going to kind of lie a little bit to the parents of the kid with the brain damage. Not a big lie, but just kind of say they're pretty sure he's brain dead, but there's one little test they're going to do, but it's probably over. Even though there is no hope, right? This is definitely happening. But his reasoning is to give them just that little slither of hope so they can make peace with the possibility before he tells them it's definite. And Collins disagrees with that and, kind of fights him on it a little bit. But he ultimately says that they have to be able to process it for a while before they can accept ultimately what's happening, and deal with it. And she kind of says maybe you should follow that advice, which maybe is hinting at his being here a year later and what he's kind of avoiding himself. Not a physical pain, but something that he's currently dealing with. So there's some other little hints sprinkled in there which are good. So yeah, I think that's me. I think that's all I've got for episode 2 of the Pitt. Curious to see how we keep developing these characters as the day goes on. But let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Subscribe, all that usual stuff. Helps out a bunch. And of course, you can support the shows and all the reviews, both here and over at Male Fuzz Movies, our movie podcast channel, by going to patreon.com/MaleFuzzTV, or by becoming a YouTube member. Any support is greatly appreciated, so thank you very much to those who already do. I will see you soon for more. So keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?